After successfully capturing Solomon, a number of strange events began occurring around the former Zeon fortress. Without an enemy in sight, Federation ships and mobile suits would suddenly explode, and at around the same time, certain people would get an ominous feeling. It was almost as if Solomon was haunted. But this so-called ghost of Solomon would turn out to be something much more fearsome than just a ghost. It was the mobile armor new type 08th Elmeth, a brand new prototype mobile armor that was filled to the brim with some of Zeon's latest technologies. And the most important of these technologies was no doubt the Psychomo system, a system that allowed for a new type pilot to control a machine through thought alone, and as included the weapons, offering some very unique possibilities. Due to Minovsky particle interference, guided weapons were no longer possible through traditional means. But Zeon researchers discovered that the special brainwaves emitted by new types did not suffer from that Minovsky particle interference. The problem was just transmitting these brainwaves to the guided weapons. Early test machines like the Brabro used wires to transmit the waves, but this had several limitations. The weapons could only go as far as the wire allowed for, and if that wire was cut, the weapon became useless. With the Elmeth Psychomo though, they discovered a way to control its guided weapons wirelessly. According to the Mobile Armors of the Universal Century book, the original plan for the Elmeth was to snipe enemy ships from beyond visual range. But after combat testing, it was determined that such long ranges put too much mental strain on the pilot, and as such, a change in doctrine was required. Rather than only focusing on ships at extremely long ranges, the Elmeth would now have to move in closer, potentially within range of enemy mobile suits. Something that then led to a technique that we're all familiar with, the all-range attack. An overwhelming attack that uses the machine's Psychomo-controlled weapons to surround the enemy, or multiple enemies, to then wipe them out with concentrated fire. And for the Elmeth, these Psychomo-controlled weapons were called bits. Essentially, these were flying gun turrets with either a powerful beam rifle or a mega particle cannon. Different sources call it different things. This weapon was powered by a mini onboard generator, and for target acquisition, it had a mono-eye sensor. The visual data captured by this sensor would then be beamed directly into the pilot's brain by the Psychomo system, allowing them to take control over these bits as if they were there themselves. And for moving around, they had a single main thruster complemented by a large amount of verniers, which made them extremely maneuverable. And because they were unmanned, they could pull off extremely high G maneuvers that were simply impossible for humans. So despite being relatively big, their erratic movements made them extremely difficult to hit, making that all-range attack that much more terrifying. The enemy was being shot at from all directions by a weapon that he could barely hit. The bits would be deployed through 2 hatches on the back of the unit, but how many it carried varies from source to source and even within the same source. According to the MSV book, it carried 10. According to the official perfect file, it carried 12. Great Mechanics first says that it carried 12, and then one page later gives a more vague around 10 number, but fair enough, 12 is around 10. And then finally, Gundam Century manages to straight up contradict itself on the same page. At the top it says 10, and then at the bottom it says 12, with potentially even more. And according to that same book, the bits only had a relatively short operating time and could only fire 10 shots each, so feel free to draw your own conclusions here. How they were controlled then was through the signature Psychomo antenna on the back. This antenna was responsible for communicating with the bits, and it also gave the Elmeth its distinct shape, which then led to the wide base nicknaming it the Tricorn Hat. And for even more firepower, it also had 2 mega particle cannons. These were mainly intended for medium to long range attacks against ships, but in emergencies, they could also be used in close combat scuffles. They had enough punch to sink a battleship in one shot, and they could also move up and down for easier target acquisition. Because of the Psychoma system then, the cockpit would look very different from other machines, including even its predecessor, the Brabro. While the Brabro was designed for use by new types, that unit still had a backup control system, so that even old types could control the thing. But the Elmeth was designed exclusively for new types, meaning that almost everything was controlled through their mind, and therefore the Psychoma system. Physical controls were kept to a minimum, and instead, the cockpit was filled with all kinds of different consoles and displays, and the pilot had to wear a special pilot suit. What the cockpit also had were shock absorbers. These were installed all around the cockpit to lessen the G-forces caused by the Elmeth's strong engines. But while it was fast, it wasn't agile, at least not agile enough to keep up with mobile suits. Unlike Zeon's other space mobile armors, the Elmeth didn't have any attitude control thrusters, and relied purely on gyro and engine steering. The theory behind this was that these thrusters would have created weaknesses in the armor, and they wanted the Elmeth to have the best armor possible. And I guess it kinda makes sense when you think about the Elmeth's original purpose as an extremely long-range unit. It just needed powerful thrusters to get it to and from the battlefield, and before the enemy could get close. But once this plan was changed, and it would need to fight at closer ranges, this lack of agility and also any kind of close combat weapons did become a major liability. Still, this required the enemy mobile suits to get close in the first place, and with the bits being as deadly as they were, this was definitely no mean feat. Overall, the Elmeth was considered a resounding success, and Zeon considered it as the first true battle-ready new type mobile armor, with it even seeing limited production. But just as with the bits, the exact amount varies from source to source. Typically though, it is said that 3 units were produced. So first up, Unit 1, and this is unfortunately the unit that we know the least about. It was piloted by an unknown pilot and was destroyed by a runaway bit during testing, showing us that despite the enormous potential of the Psychoma system, there were several risks involved. Unit 2 then is the unit that we know the most about. This Elmeth was assigned to the 300th Autonomous Squadron under Captain Char Aznable, also known as the New Type Squadron, and was piloted by Ensign Lalah Sune. This is the Elmeth that pulled off many of the achievements that we know about today, but unfortunately, it would be defeated in battle by the Federation's legendary RX-78-2 Gundam. Although, to be fair to Lalah and the Elmeth, they weren't just shot down. Instead, Lalah sacrificed herself to save Char. Lalah! Unit 3 then was piloted by Cusco Al, and this unit would also be used in real combat, but just like Unit 2, it would be destroyed in combat. In some SD Gundam games then, there are 4 Elmeths, with Lalah and Cusco piloting the first 2 Elmeths, and with a white Elmeth Unit 3 being piloted by Haman Khan, and a red Elmeth Unit 4 being piloted by Serene Experi, a cyber new type from Zeon's Flanagan Institute. And other than the color scheme, Unit 4 also had another difference. Serene Xperi and her Elmeth were part of Project Serene, whose goal it was to develop a Psychomu weapon that could control the minds of enemy soldiers. Elmeth Unit 4 was modified so that this new system could be installed, but the system itself was never completed during the One-Year War, and was therefore abandoned. Later on then, it would be rediscovered by the Titans and implemented into the Terra Sono, a machine that could be converted into a massive mobile armor and was escorted by the Despada and the Siskide. But of course, all of these are very much non-canon, just like the next Elmeth I'll be talking about, the Elmeth Namie Amuro Custom. This pink Elmeth appeared in Namie Amuro's Defend of Love music video and was piloted by Namie Amuro herself. But unfortunately, this unit also wouldn't survive the war. Amuro encountered Amuro, and only one Amuro would come out alive. Future developments of the Elmeth then would go one of two ways. The first one was taking the concept of the Elmeth and developing it further. One of the main design issues faced by the Elmeth was that the Psychomu system was massive. So the reason that the Elmeth was as big as it was directly because of this system. And in fact, it had already been miniaturized for the Elmeth. It was much lighter and smaller than the preceding Brabro, but there was still a lot of progress yet to be made. So one of the main focuses of this path was miniaturizing the Psychomu system even further, eventually resulting in the Cubile. But this path is a video for another time, although there is one unit that I have to mention here, the MAN-08S Elmeth II. This machine might sound like an Elmeth variant, but it's actually an alternate universe version of the Cubile that appeared in Dengeki Hobby. In this universe, Lalah survived the One-Year War and is then assigned this Elmeth-colored Cubile. And with the Elmeth II, she continues to serve as Char's wingman, who is now using a red Hyakushiki. A very interesting what-if story that I'll definitely have to look deeper into. But for now, we'll be focusing on the Elmeth's second design path, taking its design and making several variants of it. First up, there was the X-Man Diablo, a black Elmeth variant developed by the Lalah fleet. And I gotta say, the team working on this variant was given a very unfortunate abbreviation, the New Type Research Unit, or NTR unit for short. Don't Google that. But so, the NTR unit gave the Diablo a more sleek body, and the weapons received a very big overhaul as well. The Mega Particle Cannons were replaced by Beam Vulcans, and the bits that were previously all the same were now turned into Bit A and Bit B. These had different ranges, and rather than being stored inside of the machine, they were now stored on the hull. The empty space on the inside then would be used to store what is called a missile mine pod. The machine was originally meant to be piloted by NTR Prototype C, a cyber new type who was nicknamed Chris, but through testing it was shown that her sister, NTR Prototype D, nicknamed Dina, was better suited for the job. As for their fates, this would depend on the player, as they only appeared in an RPG in the RPG Magazine Grade Volume 2. From the Lalah conflict then, we go to the Neo-Zeon Remnant War that was fought on Mars. On one side, there was Re-Zeon, consisting mostly of Giran loyalists, and on the other side, there was Mars-Zeon, consisting of a lot of Cassilia loyalists. And amongst these Cassilia loyalists were former members of the Flanagan Institute, who just happened to have worked on the Elmeth. And now, they were working on the Elmeth's successor unit, the Helios. A machine that still superficially resembled it in cruising mode, but on the inside, it was a very different beast. And this design quirk would later on become one of the defining features of Mars-Zeon's mobile suits. Their insides were modern, but their exterior was very reminiscent of Zeon's machines from the One-Year War. So for the Helios, one of the big differences was that rather than being built as one solid machine, it now consisted of a central fuselage to which two movable binders were attached. These gave the Helios AMBAC capabilities, in addition to housing thrusters, verniers, missile launchers, I-field generators, and even mega particle cannons. In short, these gave the Helios an incredible performance boost and made it much more deadly at close range than the Elmeth ever was. But for even more close range capabilities, it could transform into its high-speed melee form, inspired by the fabulous Zacrello, the Big Ro, and even the Big Zamuru. One of the main things that happened in this form was that the binders transformed, unveiling two heat natas. This made the unit very effective at hit-and-run tactics, and this was reportedly included because of the Elmeth's fate at the hands of the RX-78-2. Although again, this is kinda misrepresenting how things went. While the RX-78-2 did take out the Elmeth, it wasn't necessarily because of a lack of close combat weapons. They might have helped, but again, the real reason was because Lalah sacrificed herself for Char. Another thing that happened was that the quote-unquote nose opened up to reveal another mega particle cannon, and thanks to its neck joint, this cannon could move around for easier target acquisition. Its final weapons then seem to have remained largely unchanged from the Elmeth, a fleet of bits. Other than the color scheme, they look identical, and even the description suggests that these are indeed the same. They're even still stored in a similar compartment at the end of the fuselage. And another thing that it shared with the Elmeth was its fate. No matter how powerful the Helios was, it would be defeated by a Gundam during the war on Mars. The pilot was killed, but the mobile armor itself was still salvageable. So in preparation for an attack on Re-Zeon's underwater base in UC-0091, the Helios was converted into the amphibious Helios Mariner. The streamlined form of the Helios lent itself very well to underwater operations, and it was now modified to be waterproof, and the thrusters on its binders were replaced with magneto hydrodynamic thrusters, or MHD thrusters for short. These thrusters use electromagnetic coils to guide seawater into the engine, where it is then pushed out to generate thrust. This technology was also used on the Gaza Mariner and the Gaza Marine type, and was borrowed from Axis Zeon, who use it on one of their mobile armors. In terms of weapons then, it remained mostly the same, but a few minor changes were made. Inspired by the Grublo, it now had 3 heat natas per binder, and the bits got a bit of an overhaul. Just like the Helios Mariner itself, they were waterproofed and the thrusters were changed, and they also got a different barrel and the addition of a sub-arm, which creates a whole lot of interesting possibilities. But their main job was to be used for precision tasks, which was aided by that mono-eye sensor. One interesting thing then that you might have noticed is that the Helios Mariner doesn't just have a Neo Zeon insignia on its body, but also a Titan's insignia. And this was because its pilot was a Titan's remnant Cyber New type called Tsukimori. And fittingly for a machine piloted by a member of the Titans, it was painted in navy blue. Its fate, though, was again to be taken out by a Gundam. But this wouldn't be the end of the Elmeth's lineage. While the Helios Mariner was taken out, its data and technology would prove invaluable for the development of the Shamblo, which was taken out with the help of a Gundam. And that has been all for the Elmeth's development history, although sometimes it also goes by different names due to a copyright issue with the Hermès fashion brand. In Japanese, both names are spelled the same, and Hermès is also copyrighted for toys. meaning that on action figures and model kits, it's usually called something like Lalah's Custom Mobile Armor or some kind of variant. But before signing off, I quickly want to show you this sleek Elmeth redesign from Solomon Express 2, which was published in Dengeki Hobby. It shows us an Elmeth with redesigned mega particle cannons and extra fuel tanks, but the real difference is on the inside. Apparently, the Psychomu system is just a giant brain. Neat. So as always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.